1959, Groningen province, the Netherlands. A team of geologists is drilling a test well in a field near the small town of Slochteren, and the instrument drops into a void. Beneath the surface, natural gas. So much gas that the first calculations look like errors. Roughly 99 trillion cubic feet, the largest natural gas field in Western Europe. The government is celebrating. Economists are rubbing their hands. Newspapers are declaring a new era of national prosperity. 20 years later, Dutch manufacturing will be in ruins. Unemployment will have risen sharply. Factories will have shut down. And the culprit will not be war, revolution, or corruption. It will be the gas itself. The very wealth that was supposed to save the country. This phenomenon will earn a name that will appear in every economics textbook in the world. Dutch disease. But before you decide this is a story about bad luck or poor management, wait. Because in the next 4 minutes you will understand something that most people never grasp. Dutch disease does not destroy economies through corruption or incompetence. It destroys them through mathematics, through market mechanisms working exactly as they are supposed to. And that is precisely what makes it so dangerous. The Netherlands in the 1950s was a model post-war economy. A country that had rebuilt itself from occupation faster than anyone expected. Advanced shipbuilding, chemicals, textiles. The Dutch competed with Germany and the United Kingdom and held their own. Exports were diversified. Industrial workers had stable employment. It was a normal, functioning, healthy economy. And then the gas arrived. And the mechanism began. The first thing that happens when a country starts exporting a natural resource in large volumes is this. Foreign currency flows in. A lot of foreign currency. That currency gets exchanged for local money, and the local currency strengthens. The Dutch guilder became more expensive. That might sound like good news. But for a Dutch manufacturer selling goods abroad, a stronger guilder meant exactly one thing. His products had just become more expensive for foreign buyers. Competitiveness dropped. Exports fell. Not because the factories got worse at what they did, simply because the exchange rate had shifted, and the market did everything else on its own. That is the first mechanism of Dutch disease. But there is a second one, and it is even more insidious. The oil and gas sector always pays more than manufacturing. Higher wages, better conditions, stronger career prospects. The best engineers, the best managers, the best workers, they all begin migrating toward wherever the money is better. The textile factory can no longer compete for talent. It deteriorates from within, slowly, invisibly, quarter after quarter, until it closes for good. No one decided to destroy it. The labor market simply redistributed itself. It was in 1977 that The Economist magazine first gave this phenomenon a name: Dutch disease. Two mechanisms working in parallel, a currency appreciation that kills exports, and a labor drain toward the resource sector that slowly kills everything else. Together, they turn natural wealth into an economic trap. Remember that word, trap. In about 8 minutes, you will understand why it is more precise than it sounds. But here is the obvious question. If the mechanism was identified and named in '77, why did Nigeria and Venezuela walk the same path anyway? Why, knowing the trap existed, did they still fall into it? The answer is painfully simple. Knowing about a trap and avoiding it are two completely different things, especially when oil is flowing out of the ground and the money arrives without anyone having to work for it. Nigeria, late 1950s, early 1960s. The country had just gained independence. The economy was agricultural, but alive. Nigeria was among the world's largest exporters of groundnuts and palm oil. These were real industries, with real jobs and real competitive capacity. And then oil was found. In 1971, Nigeria joined OPEC. Oil revenues began to rise, first gradually, then like a flood. The government built highways, stadiums, ministries. Everything was financed by oil. And here is where a logic emerged that seems reasonable in isolation, but is catastrophic in practice. Why develop agriculture when you can buy food with petrodollars? Why support a textile factory when you can import more cheaply? The state stopped investing in anything that did not deliver immediate returns. The agricultural sector collapsed. Within 2 decades, Nigeria, a former groundnut exporter, had become a groundnut importer. And here is the real shock. The true cause of Nigeria's catastrophe was not corruption, though corruption existed. And not bad politicians, though they existed too. The true cause was the structure of incentives. When money flows from underground, governments lose the motivation to build effective institutions. Why negotiate with citizens? Why collect taxes efficiently? Why create conditions for business to grow? When the budget fills itself from a pipe in the ground? Oil frees a government from the need to be competent. And most governments accept that freedom with open arms. Venezuela went even further. 1973. The OPEC oil shock sends world prices rising roughly 4-fold in a matter of months. Caracas is drowning in dollars. President Carlos Andrés Pérez announces the Great Venezuela Program. Nationalization of the oil industry, massive industrial expansion, sweeping social programs, all financed by oil revenues. He is called the nation's savior. The streets are filled with euphoria. But there is one detail that euphoria hides very well. Venezuela is spending its oil revenues faster than they arrive. The industries built with oil money are unviable from the start. They never learned to compete on open markets because they were never forced to. The bolivar strengthens. Imports displace domestic production. When global oil prices begin falling in the early 1980s, the entire structure collapses simultaneously. Debt, inflation, unemployment, political crisis. The richest country in Latin America begins its long descent. Juan Pablo Pérez Alfonso, one of the founding fathers of OPEC, the man who helped build the world's oil order, said something in 1976 that his contemporaries considered a paradox. Oil is the excrement of the devil. He did not say it as a poet. He said it as someone who had watched, from the inside, what oil was doing to his own country. The architect of the global oil cartel, speaking against oil itself, because he understood the mechanism better than almost anyone. Now, Norway, 1969. Oil is discovered in the North Sea at the Ekofisk field. Norway is a small country, with a population of roughly 4 million people at the time. It faces exactly the same choice the Netherlands faced a decade earlier. And here is where something happens that you will not find in most economics textbooks. Norway makes a decision that seems almost strange. It decides to pretend the oil money does not exist. More precisely, that the oil revenues do not exist for purposes of the domestic budget. In 1996, Norway establishes the Government Petroleum Fund, 27 years after oil production began. For 27 years, the country studied the mistakes of others before acting. The fund's principle is brutally simple. Not a single oil krone flows directly into the Norwegian domestic economy. All oil revenues are invested exclusively abroad, in equities, bonds, and real estate across the global market. Only the returns from those investments are spent domestically, and only up to 4% of the fund's total value per year. This is called the fiscal rule, enshrined by the Norwegian Parliament in 2001. What it achieves is this: the fund acts as a firewall between oil money and the domestic economy. The currency does not appreciate excessively because the incoming dollars are not converted into kroner inside Norway. The labor force does not flood the oil sector beyond a healthy level because internal incentives remain undistorted. The rest of the economy can breathe. Norway used its oil and did not fall ill. Today, the Norwegian Government Pension Fund Global is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. Its value exceeds $1.4 trillion US. For every Norwegian citizen, more than $260,000 held in reserve. A country of roughly 5 million people holds ownership stakes in thousands of companies worldwide, the same oil, as Nigeria, as Venezuela. Different decisions, a completely different fate. And what is happening right now? Russia, the 2000s. Oil at $100 per barrel. The ruble strengthens. Russian manufacturers lose competitiveness in external markets. Imports displace domestic production. The share of oil and gas in Russian exports reaches 60%. No diversification. The Dutch disease mechanism is running without a war, without an external enemy, simply through market processes. This is happening right now in more than 20 countries around the world. Dutch disease does not heal itself. It waits. So what actually determined the different fates of these countries? Not the oil. The oil is identical everywhere. The first factor is the currency mechanism. Oil revenues automatically strengthen the national currency. And this process cannot be stopped without a dedicated isolation instrument. Norway built one. The others did not. The second factor is the labor market. The oil sector pays more and draws the best people away from every other sector, not by force, but by money. When the best people leave, everything around them degrades. The third factor, and the deepest, is political. When a government has oil revenues, it loses the incentive to be effective. Why negotiate with citizens? Why build functional institutions? Why earn legitimacy when the budget refills itself from a well? This third mechanism does not just damage the economy. It corrodes the very institutions that were supposed to protect it. 4 countries, 1 resource, 4 fates. The Netherlands fell ill first and understood first. They partially recovered, though the scars remain. Nigeria lost entire industries and has not rebuilt them to this day. Venezuela followed the disease to its terminal stage. The richest country in Latin America became the site of one of the worst economic collapses in modern history. Norway, the only country that built immunity in advance. The difference between them was not the oil. The difference was institutions and the political will to do unpopular things before a crisis forced the choice. Is there a way out once a country is already ill? Yes, but it requires doing exactly what politicians hate doing: isolating oil revenues from the budget, deliberately managing currency appreciation, subsidizing economic diversification using oil money rather than instead of it. It can be done. Norway proved it. but it demands the political courage to look 20 years forward, rather than at the next election cycle. And one last thing, something that almost no one talks about. The Netherlands, the country that gave this disease its name, in 2018 began sharply curtailing production at Groningen. And in 2023, they shut it down entirely. Not because the gas ran out, because the extraction was causing earthquakes. Thousands of homes in Groningen province developed cracks and structural damage. People living above Western Europe's largest gas field spent decades in court, fighting the state for compensation. The wealth was literally destroying the ground beneath their feet. That oil rig on the horizon, seen in 1959 as a symbol of hope, prosperity, and a bright national future, now stands decommissioned. The field around it is green and quiet. The earth has finally stopped shaking. And if you look at that same rig today, knowing everything you have just learned, it looks completely different than it did at the beginning of this conversation. If you were the finance minister of a country that just struck oil, what would you do first? Spend it on your people right now, or lock it in a fund for 30 years?